if you wouldn't mind at this point in time, turning or muting yourselves. And if during the presentation you have a question, unmute yourself and we will get to your question. How about that? Because I've taken away all your pictures, so if you put your hands up, I can't see you. So for tonight, what I thought we would do is go through a rules update of all of the rule changes related to throws in 20 to 20, both in 20 and 21. In our new rule book, we had a few rule changes related to throws, as well as in March, there were a few, and last summer, there were a few. So this is kind of a review of all of them. And so some of them are, once again, a review, and some are possibly brand new. So as of 2019, IAAF became World Athletics. In Doha, they had already done a lot of the IAAF signs. So Doha World Championships was kind of a melding of IAAF into World Athletics. From now on, you're only going to see World Athletics. You won't see the old branding of IAAF. Along with the new branding came a new rule book, a total new look. And most notable, every rule changed numbers. And what they did is they broke it up. Oh, well, here's the new cresting, a little bit of a watercolor of it, but that's what the new brand of World Athletics looks like. And the new rule book has divided the rules into competition rules, which from now on will be abbreviated by CR. And we have technical rules, which will be abbreviated by TR. In the front of the very front of the rule book, you're going to find a table of rules reference, which shows the old rule numbers and what the new rule numbers are. That is only in the 2020 edition. After that, the old rule numbers, well, will become obsolete. Like, you won't see them again. So in the competition rules section, there's part one, there's a general section. There's a competition, there's competition officials, and there's the world records section. So let's look at competition rules only to begin with. And this isn't a rule change, but competition rule 25.4 is an important one to know where it is, because it gives all the standard abbreviations and symbols for things that you're supposed to, well, things that you will read on start lists, or abbreviations that you're supposed to put on results cards. And most notable for us in the field is NM, meaning no mark, or there is, they've gone through 3 rounds and they don't have a viable measurement. So it's NM that we put down there. And if somebody goes through 3 rounds and doesn't get a distance measured, then they don't get a placing. Beside them, under placing, you'll put a dash. And the other notation that we would probably use is did not start. So if an athlete's on our list, but they either didn't show or they didn't start, they didn't take an attempt, then we would put DNS for them. The rule book has further defined what a DNS is, and it's in the green print under competition rule 25.4. An athlete shall be regarded as DNS if part A is after the name having been included on the start list for any event, they do not report to the call room for that event. So the call room would put DNS on it for us. B, having passed through the call room, they do not make any attempt in a field event or do not make an attempt at a start. Or part C is if rule 39.10 of the technical rules applies. And I'm sure all of you haven't memorized the rule numbers, and that refers to the combined events, not attempting a trial or a start in the combined events. So those are all things that we would put DNS for. Competition Rule 28, conformity check. This isn't something new, but the way we do it is new. What World Athletics was trying to do with this minor change is bring it in line with photo finish and the zero gun test. A zero gun test is done before a session starts. It's not done after the session. So our field conformity checks are performed before the event, supervised by the referee using a calibrated steel tape. So if we're using EDM, then the referee and the staff would do that calibration before the event. We don't necessarily have to do it after, but there's a note. A set of check measurements should be made after, and if circumstances justify, during the event, usually without reference to a steel tape. So if maybe somebody kicked one of the legs of the EDM, or you're suspecting that there might be a problem, you might do another conformity check in the middle of the event. Just again, this isn't a rule change other than the number. Like I always knew the world records were at the end of the rule book. They aren't anymore. They're sort of in the middle. They're at the end of the competition rules section. So if you're looking for world records, that's where they are. Now we're moving into the technical rules, and there are a number of parts here. There's a general part for technical rules. There's part 2 is track events. Part 3, the important area of the rule book, of course, for all of us, the field events. And that has vertical jumps, horizontal jumps, throws. Part 4 is combined events. Part 5, indoor competitions. Part 6, race walking events. Part 7 is road races. And then they've added a section for cross-country, mountain, and trail races. Now, this is the lovely shoe rule, technical rule 5.2, shoes. It's really a note for the call room and referees. I'm not sure that we have to worry too much in throws, because they're allowed a 23 millimeter sole thickness. And we all know most of the soles and most of the throwing shoes are not all that thick. There is a new shoe rule in effect, though, as of April 2020. Only shoes that have been available to all athletes for at least 4 months can be used. It's trying to get it universal for all athletes. A requirement of a conformity check by World Athletics. It's similar to a verification of equipment. So if you've got a new shot or discus or a new kind of a javelin, it has to be checked by World Athletics. They're doing the same thing with shoes now. Technical rule 5.5, sole and heel thicknesses. We used to have this only for high jump and long jump. And now it's there's a sole thickness for all events. Addition to the definition of the diagram of how to measure the heel and the sole thicknesses, the sole is roughly 75% of the length of the shoe, or length of the foot or shoe, and the heel is 12%. And taking into consideration that you're measuring 0% is the back of the shoe. And once again, the sole thickness for field events is 20 millimeters. So as I say, in throws, I don't think it's much of an issue. And I don't really think the carbon fiber does much for most of our athletes outside of maybe a javelin boot. Technical rule 5.1.512, non-compliance. If the referee suspects a non-compliant shoe was worn, they are able to request the shoes be inspected by World Athletics. If the athlete refuses, or the shoe is found to be non-compliant, the athlete is disqualified. Again, probably not an issue for us in the field, but I wanted to make you aware of that rule change. Technical rule 8.6, under protest in a field event. So in a field event, we have, let's say, considered a throw foul, but the athlete has orally protested. So our usual plan here would be to measure the throw. If there's any type of a question, we would measure the throw, record it off to the side. It would still be a foul, but when we have chance to look at video, or in the case of an appeal, then we have the measurement. We're protecting the athlete. So in field events, where as a result of an athlete competing under protest, another athlete is allowed to continue in the competition when they would otherwise have not done so, such athletes' performance and eventual results will remain valid irrespective of whether the oral protest is successful. So let's say an athlete only has one successful, in their mind, throw in their three, and they've orally protested, and the only way that they would make it into the final 3 rounds was if their protest was successful. In that case, we would bring 9 to the final, because if their protest was not successful, we don't want to deny somebody who should have gone to the final that right. So that 9th person, regardless of whether the protest was successful or not, their results are going to go through. Hope I didn't confuse you on that one. But technical rule 9.2, a mixed competition, the previous notes in the rule have just now become part of the rule, and they're 9.2.1 and 9.2.2. Clarification in the green text, there's A, B, and C for mixed competitions in field events and races 5,000 meters or longer. And so for us, we are field events. We could have a mixed competition. So here are the notes. Mixed competition is permitted in all national competitions, subject only to the rules of the federation. So if Athletics Canada says it's okay, we're good. A mixed competition is permitted in a competition held under 1.9 and 1.10 of the international competition definition, if permitted by the area association. And the 1.9 and 1.10 are invitational meets. So they would be invitational international competitions. Mixed competitions are not permitted under 1.1 to 1.8 competitions unless field events or in the regulations. So if for a track meet, there's often rules and regulations that are meet specific, and they might allow mixed competition in the field events. Field event trials, 25.6. In situations in the horizontal field events where there are more than 8 athletes, only the 8 athletes with the best valid performances are allowed any additional trials. This requires an athlete to have a measured mark recorded as a fair jump or throw in at least one of their first 3 trials. And I know we've all had situations where you might only have 10 athletes competing, and 3 of them, let's say, might get no measurement in the first 3 rounds. Now with this rule, they have to have, or this clarification, they have to have a valid performance. So in that case, we would only take 7 to the finals. So they need a valid performance to move on to the final 3 rounds, if there's more than 8 athletes. If you have 8 or under, then it doesn't apply. We would all get 6. Field event trials where less than 8 athletes achieve such a valid performance that I just mentioned, it is only those athletes who are allowed to the additional trials. even though it means that there's less athletes proceeding to the finals. So they need 8 or more athletes, over 8 athletes, you need a valid performance to move on to the final 3 rounds. Field event order, we're talking technical rule 25.6.2, note 4, the regulations of the relevant governing body may specify that the competing order be changed again after further rounds of trials after the 3rd. So the rules have gone back to, we are only reordering after the first the first 3 rounds. But the regulations, you know how sometimes they like doing it after the 5th round because it's exciting. The last round, they're in their competition or in their placing order again. But according to the rules, if somebody doesn't tell you otherwise, we're only reordering after the 3rd round. Technical rule 25.1.7, time allowed for trials. This isn't a rule change. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear. We are back to 1 minute for a field event. Now, not vertical jumps. That's a whole different ballgame. But for their first trial, it's 1 minute. So everybody's clear on that. This is a little bit of a change, and this is really only for our technical people, but technical rule 32.2, throwing implements, unless a technical delegate decides otherwise, not more than 2 implements may be submitted by an athlete for any throwing event in which they are competing. Usually people don't carry around a bunch of hammers and shots and discs. It's usually in javelin that they can come with 3 or 4. Now the rules state they're only allowed to submit 2 personal implements for any throwing event. Technical rule 32.6, the throwing circle. A minor change here, it's just really the color of the rim. When we're talking about the circle, it's still made of an iron, steel, or other suitable material, the top of which shall be flush with the ground outside. That's not a change. It was 6 millimeters, at least 6 millimeters thick before, but the inside and the top of the rim shall now be white. So I think that provides a little more contrast so that maybe we can see foot faults a little bit better. But the color now has changed. Technical rule 32.13, trials. There is no restriction on how or from where. This is basically a long way of defining what a stationary position is for a throw, because we all know that to start a trial in all the throws, well, with the exception of javelin, we have to start in the circle from a stationary position. And what does a stationary position mean? Here we go. There is no restriction on how or from which direction an athlete may enter the circle, nor in the case of shot put is there any restriction on making contact with the stop board during this process. The relevant requirement is that once inside, they must adopt a stationary position before commencing trial. A stationary position means that an athlete having entered the circle to make their trial, and before doing so, adopts a stance in which both feet are simultaneously in firm contact with the ground inside the circle, and with no contact with the top of the rim or the ground outside. Such contact is to be sufficiently long in time to be visible to the judges. There is no requirement for the arms or hands or other parts of the athlete's body to be stationary. This will be an interesting one to discuss maybe later. I personally haven't had a problem determining when somebody's stationary or not. I mean, they usually come in, kick the back of the circle, and you know they're stationary, but there are some officials or countries around the world that wanted a definite definition of what stationary means.
Jane, can you back up one screen?
Definitely. This one?
That one. Contact.
Okay.
And no contact with the top of the rim or the ground outside. That's gone back into the rule?
Yes, but that's, John, that's just so that we know you're stationary, because I know some of those throwing shoes, I know like they curl, the toe curls,
Right.
and sometimes they curl up over the rim, and now we know that it's not a fault at the back of the circle if there's no propulsion. And but for the stationary position, we want you to be totally, because you have to start within the circle. So we don't want you touching anything outside. That's what.
Okay, so they can get in, put their feet so that they're standing still, and then you might move the right foot a little closer to the rim, and then start the actual twirl for like the discus.
There's 20 people.
Right,
That would
exactly,
work?
John.
Correct.
That was a good example. That's a very good example. As long as this stationary position has to be totally within the circle. Once they start their movement, if they kick or it goes up over a little bit, and that we don't care. Well, we do care, but it's not a
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Our meeting is canceled tomorrow because Joanne's
Does-
daughter.
Does anybody else have a question on this one, or you want a clarification?
So it's next.
Sorry, I
week.
just lost my cursor. Okay, here it is. And you know what? We can go back to it too. There's nothing wrong with going back to it. Technical rule 3214, the note under this one is, it shall be considered a failure if, oh, here we go. This is, yes, there'll be some discussion on this. It shall be considered a failure if the discus or the head of the hammer strikes the far side of the cage after the release of the implement. Now, what the far side means is, if you're a right-handed thrower and you're facing the sector, it's the left side. And I think it's easier to picture in hammer. The gate that's partially shut, that's the far side. Okay, and the near side would be the gate that's open. So whether you're throwing discus or hand, it's the same thing. So the far side, now if a discus hits that or a hammer hits that, it's now a failure. Okay, and I've got a diagram, so it's gonna, we can show it on that too. Note 2, it will not be considered a failure if the discus or any part of the hammer strikes the near cage. Okay, so that's the gate that would be open. And so I'm a right-handed thrower. It's the right side as I'm facing the sector. It's the release side. Okay. So it's not considered a failure if you hit the near side of the cage after the release of the implement, then lands within the landing sector outside the limits of the cage, providing no other rule is infringed, including 32.10. And 32.10 is you have to make a mark in the sector. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the definition of what is the inside of the cage and the outside of the cage, because if now the implement lands within the cage limits, it's still a foul. Okay, which is going to make our life a little more interesting. The limits of the cage shall be defined as the boundary formed by the cage and the gates when in position, completed by an imaginary straight line drawn between the ends of the cage gates closed to the landing sector, closest to the landing sector. Now, that's complicated. Let's see if we can show you on this. Oh, what happened to my diagram? Interesting. It worked this afternoon. Oh, here we go. Except that there's supposed to be a hammer one too. Oh, there we go. I don't know. If you look where the hammer cage would be, let's look at the hammer side because it's easier to figure out where the inside and outside are. On the left side, the gate would be closed, right? And if at the edge of the gate, you drew a dotted line to the pillar on the opposite side, that is going to determine inside of the cage and outside of the cage. Okay, so if we're only looking at the discus circle, basically, if you drew an arc, an imaginary arc from the 6 meter last pillars of the cage, if you drew an arc there, that would be determined inside and outside. And usually this is only going to impact maybe some of your combined events, you know, discus throwers who somehow or other can't get it sort of out of the cage. Most of the athletes are going to, if it lands within the confines of the cage, they're going to foul those ones anyways. So that there's an inside and an outside of the cage now. There's a far side and there's a near side of the cage. And it changes depending on whether it's a right-handed thrower or a left-handed thrower. So hopefully that hasn't totally confused you, but that's what's in the rules now. A discus. Oh, is there a question? Nope. Well, as I say,
I've got a question, Jane.
yes, do we want to back up?
Yes, still to also make sure. So now if you hit the far side of the hammer cage or the discus cage and it lands inside the sector, that's considered fault.
Oh, okay. Definitely, because it's a fault twice. Number one, you hit the far side. And number two, it lands within. Like, as soon as you hit the far side of the cage,
It's fault.
it's automatically a foul.
Okay.
Now, if you hit the near side of the cage and it lands inside the cage, it's still a foul. But if you hit the near side and it goes out into the sector, you're okay. Is that okay, Cecilia?
Selena.
Selena, sorry.
Sorry. Okay, if it hit near side and it lands in the sector line, that's considered a fault too, you said?
Repeat that again.
If it hits the near side of the cage and it lands
Yes.
inside the sector. is that
Inside the cage area.
Inside the sector, in the sector, inside the cage, in the sector, that's considered okay?
It's still considered a fault. Yes.
So everything
has
needs to
to-
pass
it has to at
outside
least-
the cage.
It
That
kind of
is
has
what-
to go like the 4 or 5 meters, like, you know, like past the cage.
Okay,
more or
so
less.
basically, if it hits anywhere in the cage, it's a fault.
Sorry,
Yes.
you're breaking up. Yes. Okay. Daryl's,
Yeah,
Daryl's,
Jamie,
on-
it has to exit the cage.
Okay, so
You
That's
just draw
totally
an
different from
imaginary
before.
line from the extension of the cage. If it doesn't go beyond that, it's a foul.
okay, because that's totally different from before. Correct?
Yes,
Okay, I got it.
because before
No,
you would
can't-
have to measure a 3-meter throw.
You can't have anything less than a 6-meter throw.
Right.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Can I ask clarification?
sure.
Fine.
And then Tim's going to talk, and then Irene, I do see your hand up. Okay, Tim?
Sorry. If I'm standing sideways looking out into the field with a discus or the hammer in my right hand.
Yes,
Is the far side of the track facing me? Or sorry, track. Is the far side of the cage, am I facing it or is it behind me?
Are you
Am I
facing
sort of-
up to the
You need-
right?
you need to stand in the discus circle
Yep,
facing the sector where you want it to land.
okay, the field.
The field, you're facing the field. The left side is the far side. The right side is the near side.
Or handed thrower, Tim.
Oh, yeah, okay, I just wanted to check that out. Okay, thank you.
So
No
when did this
problem. I
rule, when did this rule start, Jane?
Well, actually, it's been in there. It's just
That's, yeah.
a clarification.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I missed that.
I think Irene had a question, Jane.
Yes, she did, Irene.
Mine's been answered. I was wondering when this was in effect and got that answered, so.
You know what? I'm just gonna check while we're, just after I finish and you're gonna talk amongst yourselves. This might be a November one. Because it's got the diagram. And I don't remember that diagram being in the rule book. Have you?
I'm looking in the rule book right now.
I'm pretty sure it's a November 2021.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, it's November 2021. Sorry, I'm into the rules of July. There's some rules coming in July also. So we got a number of different, this is November. So this summer, don't worry about near side, far side, but actually start practicing, you know, like as the athlete, if anybody threw something short and it went off the cage, think, okay, what would I do with that? You know, like in November. So it is November 2021. And this diagram will be in the new rule book. And don't ask me when the new rule book comes out because I don't know that. I would tell you if I knew, but you know what? We'll come back to this if you like. And I only think I have a couple more. That's it. So we do. Oh, you know what? This is, don't worry about this one. It's just defining where the sides of a discus taper. And some of the discus don't have that disc in the middle, but there's a 25 to 28 millimeter sort of center of the discus. So they've just defined where the where the taper of the discus happens a little bit differently. It's not something you're going to have to officiate. But this will, this is something too that technical rule 35.1 discus competition note 2, the hammer cage movable panels or gates may be used when the cage is being used for discus throw to limit the danger zones. Meaning not just the gates are going to be along the sector line. You can bring in one side of the discus cage just like you would in hammer. Now, you're not going to do this at every competition, but if there's a problem with the stadium or the area that you're throwing and there's a danger factor, you can bring in that gate. I don't know why this is blank. This is crazy. Oh, because I've got another diagram and for some reason it doesn't like it tonight. And in the diagram here, you can see the cage, the gates are actually in. And once again, it shows far side, near side for a right-handed thrower and it shows the inside of the circle and, or the inside of the cage and the outside of the cage. And once again, once you get your own rule book with this diagram, you can get your magnifying glass out, or you can blow it up so it's a little bit larger and you can see the definition. But we may use discus, the gates for discus if we feel for safety factor that we need them. Just a definition of combined events, since we have a number of throws in combined events, that a decathlon or a heptathlon shall be held on 2 consecutive 24-hour periods in a specified order. And they've just added the 24-hour periods in there so that we're clear how a combined events will work. And now that's it for the sort of rule changes that directly affect the throws. And maybe what I'll do is quit sharing my screen so we can see your bright, shiny faces. And then if you have any questions, and they don't have to be questions just on the rules. If you've got a procedural question or any kind of question, you can bring it forward now if you like.
Jane,
Yes.
there's a question from George Stanoev, and he would like to know if he can get a copy of your presentation at some point. Could you make the PowerPoint available maybe on the Knox site, or would he have to contact you directly to get a copy of it?
No, through Surge, I can get it done.
Okay. So hope George got that answer.
Got it. Thank you. And I have 2 follow-up questions. One has to do with the iron band being white. Do we require facilities to repaint the circle with the iron band?
I would figure if you're running like a national championship of any kind, or Canada Games, you mentioned you were going to be doing Canada Games coming up, then the rim should be white. But you know, like for your provincial championships, if they weren't white right now, you know, I guess they don't have to be white, but in future, they should be white. And if you're anything like Manitoba, we would need to paint ours probably every year because the winter's so hard on them that they're painted this year, but they don't look painted next year.
Thank you so much. The second one is about disinfecting throwing implements. What do you recommend in terms of disinfecting javelins or discus after each throw, or at the beginning and at the end of the session?
After each throw.
Thank you.
Unless now some people, I know in some areas what they've done is they've gotten around that by having the athletes, each athlete has their own implement. Like it doesn't have to be their own personal implement. But what I mean is they are assigned an implement for the competition, and they throw it, exit the circle or runway in the appropriate manner, and then they go and retrieve their own. So, I mean, you can get around it that way too, in that nobody touches that implement but the athlete. The problem with that is retrieving your own implement, it takes time because, well, if you're a good thrower, you got to go out there 50 meters and pick it up. But they should be cleaned after every, and all you need is a few Sani wipes and it's done. Javelin
you.
grips are, it's a little harder, but Cecilia, I see your hand up. Sorry, Selena.
I missed the
stuck on-
beginning of I missed the beginning of your thing. What did I miss at the beginning 10 minutes?
You know what, Selena, it's recorded and you can pick that up on the Athletics Canada website. rather than make everybody else, listen to the same thing again. But I know it was recorded because we all heard the woman tell us that recording's starting now. And I'm
Okay,
sorry
thanks.
I'm sorry for you in BC that it's a little early for you, but George out in Newfoundland, we don't want to keep him up too late. So
Yeah.
we're trying to hit a happy medium.
Okay, it's on Athletic Canada, you said, under what,
Yes.
under?
Under officials, but don't look like tonight or tomorrow because it takes a little bit to get it up on the website.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Do we have any other questions or comments or concerns?
If you want to see our bright shining faces, I think you've got to allow us to turn our videos on.
Oh, really? Okay. I'll see if I can find out where that is. Because I didn't turn them off.
Well, I think maybe Serge has gone and turned it back on again.
Okay, John, I can see you. Now everybody just needs to turn their,
Just need to turn your own on.
you gotta need to turn your own on.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
there's Irene. She's around the discus cage or hammer cage again.
My video's still turned off.
that's okay, John. Keep it that way.
I know. You guys hate me.
No, nobody hates anybody, John. We've got to have another question or comment or two, don't we?
Okay, I'm just gonna step in where you said horizontal jumps and the valid performances. I'm assuming you mean measured horizontally as opposed to horizontal jumps, correct?
Well, any of the horizontal, like triple jump, long jump are horizontal, correct? And all the throws are horizontal because that's the way we measure. Vertical jumps, it's a whole different ballgame.
That's what I said. It's measured horizontally as opposed to just horizontal jumps.
Correct.
Some jumps officials could misinterpret.
Okay, okay.
So I'm coming
But
back.
any of the,
I'm coming back to the white painted rim in the circle.
yes.
What is the purpose again?
I think so that we can see foot faults easier.
And that is only in the shot put, or all the rim has to be white painted white?
It's in any like shot discus hammer, the circle, the rim of the circle.
Okay. For the hammer, we use some of the inserts that in a different color, so that they all have to be painted white now. For the
Well,
hammer
that's what the rule book says.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make that rule. I'm just the messenger.
Just
you know,
trying to
that's-
clarify how we practice here, so we're trying to understand it too. At the same time, it has to be more practical to do, right? So the facilities and whoever owns it, cage and rims, they have to know. We can only tell.
You can
All right.
ask them, Gumar, but it's up to them whether they obey you.
Yeah.
Hey, I was at a track meet over the weekend and you couldn't see the rim because of the grass that had grown over the rim and into the circle all the way around for a shot put. So don't worry about it just yet.
Once again, if you're hosting the national championships of anything, I think you should worry. Coming up this weekend, I don't know that you got to go out there and paint all the rims white. Selena,
Jane?
oh, now somebody just said Jane, but I don't.
Yeah,
see
it's
who
spray
that
time.
is.
It's spray time over here.
Oh, hello.
I have a question for you. The diagram you use, in which edition is it for the rule book? Because right now I have 2020 edition and I don't find those one. Is it?
No,
the
you
new
don't,
edition?
because it was passed in March of this year, March 2020, 2021. And it's a rule revision. You might be able to find it on the website because the rules are updated on the website. But the printed version that you have won't have that yet because it was printed in 2020.
Okay. Okay, that's
In
fine.
the
Thank
new
you.
edition, when that comes out, they're going to have that diagram in there, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Jane, a question.
Elena has a question.
Sure.
Oh, Jane, my question's back to the rim white thing. What happened if it's a removable rim? You know, the inserts. Does that have to be white too? Like, you know, the inserts you put in and out?
Right.
To a
They
discus
should,
circle?
yes, they should be white.
Okay.
But once again, I mean, this isn't something that has to be done right away. But when they need painting, the color should be white. Any other comments or questions?
Okay, I got one last question. It's gonna be silly. You know how you said if the hammer discus hit the far side of the cage and it's a fault, what happens is it just skims the edge but it keeps going out into the field. Is that still a fault?
It's okay. On the far side, it's the hammerhead and the discus. So if the handle skims the net, it doesn't matter. Or if the hammer skims the handle skims the gate, that's okay.
But not the ballpark.
Not the head, no.
Oh.
That's a fault.
Alicia here.
Yes.
Okay, I have a question going back to the number of athletes advancing to the final round. I think on one slide it said more than 8, but on the subsequent slide it says less than 8. So what happens when there's 8?
Okay, that was a bit confusing. It was trying to define if there's over 8 athletes, and so you have to cut down to the final 3 rounds, then everybody who advances on must have at least 1 valid throw. Okay? And that even if it means you're going to take less than 8 to the final, that's what that said. If you have 8 or under athletes in a competition, everybody's going to get 6 throws, regardless of whether they have a valid one in the first 3 or not. Because by the rules, everybody gets 6 throws.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem. And I think I see a note here that Janet and Tim have raised their hand.
Yep. Yeah, my question is go on the one that we just had. If you have 9 people and the 9th one had no valid trials because they were all kind of fault, but there was a protest. So is the protested throw considered a valid trial in order to go to the final?
Excellent question, Tim. Because I told you 9 would go, correct? All right, the 9th person in that case would not go to the finals because they didn't have a valid throw.
Okay,
Okay,
and thank you. And where can I find the timing rule? I missed that.
the timing rule?
Yeah, the rule.
I'm just paging through here. Sorry, I don't have them memorized by
That's
numbers
okay.
anymore. Technical rules. Because that was just a reminder, but yes, for verticals, you're gonna want to know, but really they haven't changed.
No,
but I'll find it.
No.
I
Time
found it.
alone, 2517.
But Jane,
Yes,
Thank
for,
you.
for Tim's question, if you've got 9 competitors for a throws event,
yes,
competitor number 8 doesn't have, competitor number 8 has not got a valid throw in each of their first 2 trials,
Agreed.
and something screws up, and their third trial, they end up protesting.
right,
Competitor number 9 does not have a valid throw at all.
right.
Do you take 8 or do you take, you'd have to take 9 because the person with the two faults and the protest might not be considered, right? So the
Right,
9th
but the
person
person-
comes along as the potential fill-in person?
No, because that person with no valid trial and no protest, right? They just didn't get one.
Right.
They're not going to advance no matter what. Because remember the rule stated if you have more than 8 athletes in an event, you're only going to advance the people with a valid trial. Even if it means taking less than 8 to the final.
So so the protested throw is kind of considered a semi-valid throw, but the other person, because they have actually no valid throws, isn't included.
Correct. And the only reason that you're advancing that one person with the protest was to protect the athlete in case they win their appeal. Because otherwise you're penalizing them and they won't get their final 3 throws. Their final 3 throws are not going to count if they don't win the appeal.
Okay.
Correct?
So if the 9th person had had a valid throw,
You would have taken them.
but it was smaller than the protested distance, then you would have taken them. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Thank
That's
you.
why it's important to measure those ugly throws sometimes, because it might be their only valid measurement. I think it happens more in horizontal jumps than it does in throws. Usually we get 1 in there anyways.
Yeah, they get their insurance throw in, and then that's it.
Yes, but it happened to us in the World Championships in Doha. The Hungarian thrower on his very first throw threw a great throw, and it got him into the finals. Turns out it was actually a foul. We find out later because Poland came in and protested. And when you looked at video, sure enough, it was a foot fault, but he was advanced, and they didn't protest until I think the event was over. And I kind of questioned, I said, you're protesting now? Like, and that was the first round. But we got a problem as a jury in that Daryl would know, best, and there are some other throwers out there. When you get a great throw on your first throw that gets you into the finals, and you foul your next 2, or you kind of go for the gusto because you're in the finals already, right? And if we take the first throw away, well, now he has no valid trials in the first 3 rounds and wouldn't have made it to the, so it's a catch-22. The field officials, the referee, all of the people around the circle did not see this foot fault. And in this day and age of televised and slow motion and whatever else, some armchair spectator radioed the Polish team, phoned them on there or texted them or WhatsApped them. And it's very interesting now. Anyway, any other questions? I'm not going to keep you. What time? Oh, we're past an hour already. Because I could talk throws forever. But what we'll do is we're going to set up another like another meeting of us. But the Olympics start for track and field on July 30th, and they run through August 8th. I don't know about you, but I'm an Olympic junkie. For me, they start on July 23rd because that's the day of the opening ceremonies, and I'm glued to my TV for 18 hours a day. So we're going to give everybody a break from event group Zooms to watch the Olympics, and we'll probably resume in, and then you can enjoy the summer because we have the Paralympics from, I think it's August 24th to September 5th. And maybe we'll reconvene in September sometime, once the fall starts. Janet and Tim, do you have a question?
No,
Or
I just have a
comment?
comment that you may be interested in. And that this morning I heard that a Paralympian girl from the US is not allowed to take her support person. Now, that doesn't sound too bad until you find out she's deaf and blind. I just think that's horrendous.
And that might be remedied, Tim. This is all because of COVID, not because they're trying to be strict and stringent. It's just they're trying to limit the number of people that are coming into the country, and they have they've limited the number of federation people that can come in, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is an extreme case. Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
well, I can accept.
and I'm
that.
sure it's going to be remedied,
I hope so.
or I hope it would be.
Thank you.
Jane, it's Pritam over here.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, it's Pritam over here. I have a question for you. So you mentioned about the fact of 8 or less than 8 in the final and everything, right? But what about qualification
Yes.
round? Do we have a limit of athletes that are going to be kept? Say the final is not on the same date.
In a qualification, there's usually a qualifying standard that they have to make, that if they make it, they're automatically into the final. And if we don't have 12 athletes make the qualifying standard, which would be a big queue, then they qualify by distance, or their best distance, and they'll top it up to 12.
Okay, that's fine. I thought that the 12 was because it had been updated or something like that. That's good. Thank you.
No. In qualifying rounds, they still would like to take 12 to the final.
Thanks.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining this evening. I hope you found it beneficial. And we will, I wish you a happy viewing of the Olympics and the Paralympics. And I wish you luck with all of your competitions in whatever form or manner